My guest today is actress and filmmaker Evelyn Lorena and her production collective, Nouvelle Entertainment, where she has written and produced films that have premiered at the Atlanta Film Festival, Outfest Los Angeles, and Festival Regard. Now, Evelyn was one of the directing semifinalists for the inaugural Brisk Creators class, sponsored by Michael B. Jordan and his company, Outlier Society. Now, her latest short and directorial debut, Gabriela, was awarded with the prestigious Latino Film Institute's Indigenous Latino Fellowship, supported by Netflix. Now, Evelyn's short film, Gabriela, is a visually captivating coming-of-age story with a poetic reflection on identity and personal resilience and the liberating power of water. So let's welcome filmmaker and actress Evelyn Lorena and her Oscar-qualified short film, Gabriela, to the show. Welcome, Evelyn.
Hey, hi, how are you? Thank you so much for having me. And to everybody watching and listening, thank you so much.
Oh, absolutely. Now, you've got to tell me, you've got quite the resume already. What led you into filmmaking?
Thank you for saying that, because sometimes it feels like, oh, am I doing enough? Um, uh, what got me into filmmaking? It was mostly because I was disappointed originally in the way that castings and the way that the Latino community was being perceived in a lot of different stories. Not that some of them had their place, but I wanted to see kind of an expansion of our humanity. And one Saturday afternoon, I got bored and I wrote my first short, and Mars produced it and, helped me shoot it. And then it just kind of tumbled into this story, and here we are. And then we got the fellowship for the film, and it's just been kind of a whirlwind the last couple of years. So yeah, it's been crazy.
I have to say, I love, and I mean this from the bottom of my heart, I love the Hispanic and Latino community.
Oh, thank you.
They're some of my favorite guests because they're so much fun. But they're so creative, which of course everybody has a creative spirit within them, but
Mhm.
I don't know, there's just something special there. But I
Mm,
agree, the community is underserved in Hollywood. And I've
mhm,
said this to others, and people will say, well, why would you say that? They have this network, they got that network, and and all. And I said, no, 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 no. You got to look a lot closer than that, because when it comes
mhm,
to film, when it comes to, let's say, television dramas or sitcoms, it's still an underserved culture in the
mhm.
world of television and film, and really needs to be greatly expanded. So I was very pleased to have this film sent to me so I could watch Gabriella. And, when I watch this film, this is the type of film that I really, truly love, because
Thank you.
it's about self-discovery in the face of opposition. I love what I call stories of adversity to victory. And
Yeah.
and in this film, it's that opposition being part, again, economic status. It's part family pushback. So I do love stories like this. So for you, why was this story so important to tell?
Well, one, because of the um well, I wanted to address what you also said, is that it's so true about what you were saying about the Latino community, because we're also some of the largest ticket holders when you go to the cinema, percentage wise. So it is wild that there isn't more of that. And sometimes, like you said, it's underserved in the sense that there's a lot of tokenizing of things, and I think that that's one of the reasons, to lead into your next question. One of the reasons I wanted to make this is to really play on the stereotype a little bit, because the film itself starts as, oh, I might be seeing kind of like a downtrodden, maybe immigrant story, but then it shifts into her inner life and her humanity. And that's kind of the journey I want for the Latino community in representation as well, where you think you're seeing one thing and you discover an enormous amount of empathy by the end for something that you maybe othered for yourself before. So that was one of the reasons, was representation. But I think on a deeper level, it was reflective of what I was going through in my personal life too. I infused a lot of what I was going through, which, in addition to, portions that came almost autobiographically from my own family, also I was going through life and death sort of health circumstances. Even when we started shooting, I was going through dialysis and hospital visits before set. I had to, go to do those treatments in the morning at like 5 in the morning and then head to set. And it was all me examining what personal freedom actually meant, because prior to shooting, I had, just woken up from like a coma, relearning how to walk, and there was so many limitations on my life that could have continued. And I started to question spiritually, like, what am I, how do I source a sense of strength and spiritual fortitude to continue this if I do have these restrictions? How do I still feel free? And then I started to, because I was also writing the story, almost alongside all of this happening, I started to infuse that spiritual concept into the film as well.
Yeah, one of the things I will always be grateful for is that God's not racist.
Yes, I
And
know. It's taught. That's what I like
yeah,
to say about
and
racism. It's taught.
but
Yeah.
we're all the same on the inside.
Hmm.
And that's one of the things that I was noticing in this film of yours, Gabriela, because especially when she was standing outside that gate of the country club and watching everyone swim, and she knew where her heart, her ambition was, but then someone comes up to her to remind her that by judging her, judging possibly economic status or even her, the ethnic group, and that is a brutal reality when people are, regardless who they are chasing their dreams, and then you get some nitwit like that shows up to remind you that, or
Of
saying
everything you're not.
yeah, or you don't belong here, blah blah blah, and it goes back to you slow. You went in slowly exposing elements of stereotyping, but still showing that regardless who you are, we can chase the dream.
Hmm. Yeah, and that's I think that I wanted that in the film too, because it's very truthful to my life, where everybody I think knows what it feels like to try and defy expectations, and sometimes you meet them and sometimes you don't. And what you learn in that reconciling of, if you don't have victory, for example, the way that you want, you always have some kind of spiritual growth within yourself, reconciling, whatever it is that you're going through. And I wanted that to be shown in the film, um, in a kind of subtle way too, because I think that that's how it happens in life. For me, it's never been, as much as I appreciate the very climactic moments that you might see in like a superhero movie when there's victory. To me, those moments actually happen in a lot quieter way, and in a lot quieter way for us, on an everyday scale, where one day you're looking in the mirror and you recognize something different and you kind of have that cognition, and then you're able to move forward with a different outlook or perspective. But those moments, I mean, sometimes they can feel climactic, but to me it felt more genuine and authentic to represent it in a more subtle way.
Yeah, there was an element in this film that I'm really glad that you showcased, because I think
Mm,
everyone who is chasing a desire or a dream, they come up against an opposition that they don't really would expect.
hmm.
And so when a person wants to step outside their comfort zone, the first people who get their feathers ruffled is usually family. And this is a
Oh
very
yeah.
strong element in your film. So why did you put that in this film?
Because exactly what you're saying, the truthfulness of that, and especially if people from the Latino community are watching this, I'm sure and it doesn't even have to be the Latino community. It's very universal that there are generational clashes within families. It's just the nature. I'm starting to think that it might just be the nature of family because they're the ones that force you to grow. And so you just have to have a little bit of resistance or something. Um, but uh, the reason I did that was just from the experiences I also had in life and what I saw of my fellow colleagues and friends and the things that they've been going through with their families. And I just thought, realistically, for what she's doing and the way that sometimes the generational kind of Latino community um, has perceived certain careers for their children. I say that because my parents were not originally supportive of me doing anything in the entertainment industry. It was not practical to them, which is understandable. They're, working class and that just is not real for them. But I wanted to show that resistance, especially with something that felt outside of the norm, that wasn't necessarily, as she says, like working class or of the earth or whatever.
No, I agree. I agree, and I love that. And and so, but there's a scene in this film, and I probably played this scene a few times to really
Mm.
grasp it because Gabriela says something, and I was like, "What?" Now, what I want to figure out here is, and you can tell me, why
Hmm.
didn't her mother? I mean, why did her mother, or her mother didn't tell her that she was undocumented until basically until she got into high school? I mean, is this common in undocumented families? I was actually really surprised to hear that, and I'm like, but are you protecting your child? Because once they graduate, the world's going to view them differently.
I have discussions about protection with my father in particular all the time because there were certain things that personally I was always confused about. I'm like, how are you protecting me? This is actually not planning out the way that you think it is. So that's, just in general, I think that there's that disconnect between, children and parents oftentimes. But for her, yeah, actually, there's so many people that I know personally, and especially like those that with the DACA situation and things like that, that is a very real thing. And without getting too personal, because I don't know how much my parents would want me to reveal that, I also did not know that members of my family also had that until about the end of high school as well. And I think it was done just strategically to not, I mean, obviously you're going to, like you said, you're going to find out like what's the,
Yeah, it's
you
like
can't
being
do certain
adopted.
things.
Yeah, it's like being
Yeah.
adopted. You're going to find out.
Yeah.
And
But
but
it's just a strange thing of thinking that and also because I think when it comes to the children, you I think it's coming from the point of view of they're not going to understand why this is a bad thing because children like racism seems kind of odd. You know what I mean? It's like taught. And so I think it's the same thing, the same impulse of protecting the children early on that they just might not understand why. Because if you try to explain that, I'm sure to a child, they would seem it's ridiculous. They're like, why can't we just all get along, you know?
well, yeah, well, I felt
um,
really bad because when she was, I guess, talking to her boyfriend, laying in the grass,
mhm.
and chilling out, and when she said it, I was like, oh no, because when I replayed the scene a few times,
Mhm.
I'm like, okay, if I was in her shoes, how would I feel if I was told that here is someone been going to school for a long time in America, you've made friends,
Mhm.
you feel like, hey, this is, either you have no idea that you were brought into the country, or maybe you figured that you were born here, because some people may not remember how when they were
Yeah.
small, but then you're told, and then the moment you graduate, it's like someone shoved you 10 steps backwards.
Or that you don't
Because,
exist. Yeah.
yeah, and that's what she alluded to in that scene. And then I was just like, I felt so bad. you know? Well, see, because now she's treated no different than someone that was coming over the border yesterday for the first
Mhm.
time. And I found that truly heartbreaking because she was looking at the rest of her life to pursue whatever she wanted. She wanted to be on that swim team and all sorts of things. And I'm like, you just ripped the rug out from under her.
Yeah. And it's interesting because a lot of the reference that I have for undocumentation comes from an earlier time because the mixture of what my parents went through, which was predominantly 80s and 90s kind of situation, and then now there have been a lot of advancements, I think, where, not only with like DACA, things like that, where people have a lot more opportunity, but there's still so much limitation that people don't understand. And one of the reasons I wanted to create a real human story as well was because of all the scapegoating that does happen in the media and the false information that is out there about this particular community. Um, and I always find it kind of crazy that every time something goes wrong, somebody's blaming an immigrant, which is, and it's happened historically. It's not just, with, people from Latin America, but yeah, I don't know. I don't know if you're familiar. Well, obviously you just said that you didn't know, but there's a lot of, I think I saw maybe last year there was a story in the news about that where there was a guy trying to go to college and it was the news was following him around and talking about how he didn't know, and he was talking about, yeah, I didn't know until like last year, and he was 17, and I thought that was you know wild, and it continues.
Yeah, and it just makes it hard. But the mother in this film,
Oh, I love her.
yeah, um, not only did she, I mean, nail the part in this film, but the issues that she portrays. I
Hmm.
mean, like you said, many Hispanics and Latinos come from working class families, and is the mindset, I mean, because the mother has had the mindset in this film like, this is what we do.
Hmm.
And it's almost like telling Gabriela, and I think she was trying to break it to her in a very nice, motherly way,
Yeah.
but it's like you just need to get in line and realize where you're going to be for the rest of your
Hmm.
life. And I found that heartbreaking, you know. So her,
Yeah.
the mother's mindset, I'm like, really? Is that
Yeah,
common?
it's well, yeah, and I so I think making this film created so much empathy for my parents as well. Um, because I don't think, one of the things I think being in the United States that is different from other countries around the world is that we do have the privilege of the idea of freedom, right? Like the American dream, all this thing. We can dream something, and thankfully we have that there are certain things to be desired, but for the most part, there's a lot of opportunity here, which is why so many people come here, because of not only economic opportunity, but career opportunities, just the idea of having that kind of freedom. And I think it's something we take for granted because when you live in other places, like where my parents are from and all of that, there is something that happens, and it's to no fault of their own. It's just a matter of you face reality, and one day you have to reconcile with that and say, well, this is the truth of the matter, which for them, with my father and my mother, I think because that sort of freedom was not real to them until later in life when they moved here, I think they just adopt that as truth. Like I said, like that is a truth of reality. We are working class people, and those other things have not ever been real for me. So I just accept this reality as true. And that was always a source of conflict, I think, generationally for me and my parents, for example, which is why I tried to infuse the story with that sense of truth, because it was. And I think I even had that conversation with my father as a young girl because I wanted to be in the entertainment industry since I was yay big. And I remember he said, we were watching, I think, gosh, I don't remember what we were watching, but we were watching something on television. And I said, look, I want to do that. And he was like, that's not for you, you know? And he wasn't saying it in a way that was, like you said, like Alma says it. He was saying it in a protective way. You know what I mean? It wasn't because, and he didn't want me to go down something where I'd be disappointed or that I wouldn't make it, or, he wanted me to do something practical because that's the way he's trained, you know? Um,
Yeah, you said it perfectly. It was a protection. It was a love
yeah.
of protecting, his daughter from being hurt, from being let down.
Yeah.
But I'm glad you're in the entertainment business.
Thank you.
I'm glad you
Um,
got there because I interview
I'm
people.
stubborn too, though.
Yeah, I mean, I interview people from all over the world, and so when I hear the word diversity, I'm like,
Yeah.
yeah, I see it. I can see it, you know. But then when people want to put it into a box, it's a whole different story. But
Hmm.
on the, and ladies and gentlemen, you have to realize something. This film, Gabriela, is really an inspirational film. And so if you feel like you're in a box, you're stuck in your comfort zone, then this is a film you want to watch and realize don't let anything hold you back. And but and I was, I got a heart. I think I got a heart broken in this film about 3 times. So, uh, because when she told her mother that she was going to work with her, I was just like, oh man, because she was trying to surrender to the idea of living and being the stereotype that society had labeled her,
Hmm. Yeah.
but she still saw her dream alive when she looked into the mirror. She knew she had self-worth. She was just trying to figure out how to get over the hurdle.
Yeah, and I think that was I think that was definitely my intention by the end of it being, empowering, not just for her in the literal story, but for whoever was watching, because um and I don't mean it in like a righteous or propaganda way. I just mean it in the sense that, you see another human being struggling and relating to that and saying, no, I can continue, whatever the circumstances are, um, whether they're dire or not dire or whatever, and I think at the end, it is so important that regardless of what you're going through, that, and I think this is part of maturing and coming of age, that you see your own worth. You may not get things in life the way that you planned. Things may turn out much differently than you planned, but you always have to have a sense of value and self-worth. And to me, that is the ultimate sort of existential identity, because we talk a lot about superficial identities in society, I think, today, where it's like, I'm of this community or I am of this superficial identity, blah, 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 which is important. But beyond that and above that, there is that sense of self worth that I think we're all really trying to find, whether through those superficial identities or elsewhere.
Well,
Um,
what I loved about this film, Gabriella,
yeah.
is that she was not insecure. And I really love that. She had an inner strength.
Hmm.
She wanted to be part of that country club's swim team,
Yeah.
you know. And I think regardless what your background is economically,
Hmm.
culturally, go after the dream. And if you upset people along the way, that's their problem, not yours. And
Yeah.
so And so I was looking at some of these things in this film, and I'm like, yeah, you go, girl. Don't settle. Go for it. Um, but there was a question I had in this film, and it's the
Mhm.
beach scene.
Okay, yeah.
Two things. Did her father drown? And is that the reason why her mother did not want her to pursue being on a swim team?
So it's interesting because I left that sort of open because so on the journey into the country, not everybody obviously can come in easily. They, uh, in Spanish, well, I won't reference that phrase, but there's a particular phrase where you're talking about things being wet and crossing over, and I wanted to play on the mystery of that because I think that's very much a mystery. He obviously dies on the way here. Is that's the reason.
Oh, okay. I figured that he
But
had passed. I wasn't sure
yes,
exactly how,
yes,
but I picked that up in that scene.
yeah, and I think the reason I left it a bit of a mystery is because one, it's very painful for clearly for Elma to talk about losing, the patriarch of the family because especially, if he was the one that was sort of the reason they came to the country, you know what I mean? That inspiration behind him. And so she was kind of left to her own devices, which is why she's a cleaning lady and all these backstories that's there. But yeah, I wanted it to be purposefully almost mysterious because I think to the American public, there's not a lot of revelation about that journey. You know what I mean? And about how difficult it is. There's a woman that I know personally. She has a business here in North Carolina. And if you heard the stories that she had to go through just to cross the border, I mean, you're talking about rape and all kinds of different things. And she has got a thriving business now. She is strong. She overcame those obstacles. And I was so inspired by that because it was just something that I think people don't see. And so I kind of, to keep it authentic, left it a bit, mysterious, but also referenced it because it is a huge part of their story and lives. Um, yeah.
Yeah, and yeah, I get that. Yeah, and I've heard some of the horror stories. Yeah,
Yeah.
and I don't fault people for wanting to come to the land of opportunity and to find
Yeah.
opportunity. You can't fault the human element for that.
And that's what makes the whole issue, I think, so complicated because you understand there's, the legal policy sort of issues that obviously I'm not a politician or policymaker, so I can't talk about that. But on the human element, like you said, how do you fault, like if you were in that same situation and you needed to leave, I would guarantee you 99.9% of people would do the same. And and so it's because it's an issue of survival. It's not necessarily, just because the like you said, the way that people just judge things on superficial ideas. And so yeah, I don't fault humans for doing that. I don't know what the answer is policy wise, but I do know that whatever solution we're going to come up with needs to be something that is full of empathy and full of nuance in considering all the reasons that this is happening.
Yeah, you have a short film that goes beyond being short when it
Yeah, it
comes
feels it
to.
feels longer, doesn't it?
Well, no, I mean what I'm saying is that this is one story,
Hmm.
but what you did with this story is you have all of these very strong elements that
Mm,
that synergistically weave together because a lot of people don't get it. I mean, if I think back when I was in high school and somebody said, "Okay, how many Hispanics or Latinos did we have in our graduating class?" I'd sit there and I'd go, two that I remember.
I was the only one in mine.
Yeah. And so, but we didn't think anything different. We're all, we were all friends, didn't think one way or the other about it. You know,
Hmm.
now it just seems to be on the forefront of every newscast. But there's a line in this film,
Mm.
and it just, I don't know, it bothers me.
Okay.
Um, it's, and it says, sometimes we can't have the things we want. And I'm like, but I don't believe that.
I don't either, but yeah, go ahead.
Yes, but, and not only do I not believe it, I know that Gabriela didn't believe it either. Now, I do understand that we all have to do things we don't want to do or like to do. That's just part of life. But usually it's those things that drive us to achieve the things we want to do. So for her in this film, she didn't want to be cleaning rooms. She didn't want to be a maid, but doing something that she didn't want to do and didn't like is driving her passion to do what she really wants to do.
Yeah, and I'm not and this is just coming from me
Hmm.
playing Gabriella, is that even as the character, I didn't feel like I judged the idea that my mother cleaned house. It wasn't just because, oh, I'm better than that. It was not that. It was just a matter of like, I don't align with this, and I'm trying to just make something of myself separate from you. It had nothing to do with, and I think the mother sometimes saw it that way, where she's like, why don't you get it? Be reasonable, and I think she says that in the film, and so um, I think that was like a big source of conflict and misunderstanding between both of them,
Yeah, but
and
you portrayed it correctly because Gabriella wasn't dissing on her mom for what her mom was doing at
yeah.
all. Because she knew that her mom was providing, all the things that she had. And
Hmm.
so, but you're right. She wanted to do something different and apart from that. But there was this tiny little scene, and I think it was a sign of, I want to say respect, but it's not respect. I think it's
Hmm.
stature. Remember when they're standing at the bus stop, and
Yes.
then Gabrielle wants to sit on the grass, and her mom goes, "Stand up."
Yep.
I was like, you stand up. You know, don't be sitting down on the ground. And I think that was her mother saying, look, stand up. And in a way, you, it's almost like for me when I watched it, it's like you are somebody. So stand up, be strong. Don't be embarrassed who you are, because her mother got it. But like you said, she was still doing the protective mode.
Yeah, it's and I see that with, again, not to relate too much to, like, my own family, but it's just it's just coming from my experience and what I know, and I see that with my parents all the time, where there's like this contradiction of, they actually understand me better than anyone. Yet the way that sometimes they treat or respond to me, it's as if I'm a stranger. And I think that I wanted that with her, because there is love there. There is such deep love between the two, which is why the ending, I think I wanted it to be so powerful, and the bridge of the generations. But, you know, it's just the miscommunication and the misunderstandings that happen between people, like the missed signals almost.
Well,
Um, yeah.
this is why, ladies and gentlemen, this is why I want you to see this film, Gabriella, when you get the chance, because you know, when we become parents, nobody hands us a manual. We don't
Oh, yeah.
know what's right. We're winging it from day one. The kids don't know that until maybe they become an adult and they're like, "Oh yeah,
We
they
know
didn't
that
know."
later.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And so we're like, "Oh, they didn't know either."
Mhm.
And sometimes when a parent says something or does something, the child needs to realize that we're not saying no, or we're not saying that you can't. Sometimes the things that come out of our mouth and our actions, like you said earlier, it's a love and it's a protection because we don't want to see our kids hurt. But
Yeah.
sometimes you do have to let go because they're going to have to find out for themselves. But we still have
Right.
to be parents in the end. And that parenting doesn't stop regardless how old we become.
Yeah, and that's the archetypal, I'm not a parent yet myself, but I think I can recognize that that is the universal archetypal journey of the parent, that's part of the role that you explore, And yeah, I just remembered something that you had just mentioned about that phrase that Alma says where we can't have what we want. And it just occurred to me, I reminded myself just now that that actually did almost directly, I think, come from my father. Um, now that I'm thinking about it. So yeah, there is a now that every time I do an interview, I start to realize like, yeah, that subconsciously is like from my life, I mean, but I think that's true of any piece of art. Like you'll finish it and then you're just like, wow, that was infused with like half of my life and I didn't even realize.
Oh well, yeah, yeah. But there's something about this film that visually caught
Mm.
my eye right off. You've got to tell me about the cinematography
Oh yeah.
and the coloring because I know that Xenia Patricia was your cinematographer.
Mhm.
So tell us about the cinematography as well as the coloring because that was a major element in this film.
Yeah, so the cinematography, I felt so blessed and lucky that we got Xenia because um, at the start of the film, we had a little bit of trouble trying to find the right fit of people who, or at least in cinematography world, um, who understood the sensibility of the story. Um, and then when we finally found her, within minutes, I was like, "This is the person." Like I just know. Um, and it was really important that whatever we shot had several elements. So one, we wanted it to feel as still as possible so that it almost felt like a painting where you're looking at something that's in the frame and feeling and studying that with a lot of focus. Like, we didn't want a lot of movement or distraction because it was about her and her inner life or whatever was in the frame. And then secondly, in addition to the stillness, we wanted to find a balance of straddling two worlds. Like we wanted it to feel very grassroots, and even the lenses that we chose had a sense of flatness. And also, trying to have that poetic feel of what film would look like because originally we were going to shoot on film, but then we couldn't due to like some stock issues. And so that was very conscious and not only accomplishing the grassroots feel, but then having that sense of, which I'm sure you felt, a sense of grandiosity as well. Um, and that was a tricky balance because you don't want the visuals to feel so far away that it feels like a different film from her, but you also want it to feel as close to her to like reflect, her sort of inner struggle as well. So it was a lot of work and conversations with Xenia about how to create the stillness and how to balance that in each shot to portray that sort of tension.
So tell me about the coloring because I noticed that right off.
Um, Same thing. I had those discussions with the two colorists, Alice and Alex. They did a beautiful job of understanding the subtleties of what I wanted because there was originally I wanted it to feel very faded and then go into a lot of color. But as I went along, I realized that I wanted it to still feel colorful at the beginning because that's the alluring part of what she's trying to get. So I think that the colors ended up becoming more heightened after that. Um, and that was important to me that it felt also like its own world and very distinct so that when you watched it you were like, this is Gabriela's world, this is a very specific film, and it had a very specific coloring and look and stillness to that. I didn't want it to feel and Maris the producer can attest to this, I didn't want it to feel at all fancy or digital. or feel like any other film out there. Like that was very important to me, that it had its own voice in that way, because she has her own voice, and that kind of honors the purpose of the story, which was to honor her and her inner life and her humanity. So the color, believe it or not, was really important in that regard.
Well, the coloring, when I was looking at it, and if you look at the scene where, remember when she's sitting on the edge of the pool,
Oh yeah. Hmm.
and if you just look at that scene alone, I was like, the colors are very vibrant. But when you look at it, you're trying to wonder, film or digital? Because it's caught between the two worlds
Yeah.
because of the color. Um, the saturation of the color is what brings the whole thing to life. But that's the whole thing when you have a film about the main character that
Hmm.
has a dream, that has a desire. Because if you meet that dream or you're on that journey to that dream, it's a whole different world. It's a whole different feeling. Like you said earlier, it's almost like a spiritual experience when you're chasing that dream. And what are dreams? They're colorful.
Very colorful.
And that's what this film is probably one of the most colorful shorts that I've seen this year.
Oh, thank you.
And that's a good thing, because you see stories where they're cold, cool, or cold, drab, but
And that's
they're
very
but
trendy right now, by the way. But
yeah,
that's
oh
what I
yeah,
didn't want.
yeah, yeah. I call it the very cold, dramatic, traumatic look is what I call it. But
Yeah,
it
yeah.
plays well depending on the storyline. But
Yeah,
no, this
totally, totally.
yeah, but this worked so well for you. Now, what have the audience's reactions been to this film, and what are some of the questions that you get?
I mean, I've been humbled and overwhelmed with the positive response that we've had with the film. And I don't say that lightly or take it for granted, because I know how difficult making films are. Just, not only from being in them, but, witnessing my colleagues trying to do things, and even myself. So, one, I feel very fortunate for that. But just critically, um, we've had such positive responses from reviewers and from articles and things like that. But direct audiences at screenings, I've been mostly surprised. Originally I thought, oh, maybe, this will be, more tailored for a female demographic, etc. I have been shocked that men at the end of screenings, it's been men that have come up to me or written to me, via email or DM, and they have, or even personally, have said how much they relate to the story and how it meant, that they understood, that struggle to find yourself. And that has been so wonderful for me, because that was the only thing I could hope for in creating the story and making it universal. Because I didn't, like I said at the top of the conversation, I didn't want for it to be another, relegated to the niche sort of areas of storytelling. I wanted it to feel universal, and hopefully it does. I can only speak to my intention. I can't speak for how other people perceive it, but, if I'm going by just, the feedback and commentary, it's been, um, very overwhelming and pleasantly surprising.
Yeah, yeah. The thing I found in this film was that self-discovery and self-worth collide,
Yeah, for sure.
and that's why this film has such a very very strong message to it.
Thank
Uh,
you.
Now you've got to tell me about the Netflix and the Latino Film Institute's Indigenous Latino Fellowship. What is that?
Yeah. So, yeah, we were very honored to be, one of five filmmakers, to be, yes, chosen for that. Basically, the Netflix Creative Fund for Equity, gives, funds to different organizations to fund their films, short films, and La Leaf and Latino Film Institute. Each year has five different Afro-Latino filmmakers and five Latino filmmakers, and we were one of the five. So yeah, it just happened. And yeah, I think they're in their fourth year now. So if you're a Latino filmmaker, go for it.
Exactly. You got to go for it. Well, congratulations
Yeah,
to you on
thank
that.
you.
And ladies and
Yeah, it
gentlemen,
was a
uh,
surprise because no, because I was literally I remember applying. I was getting out of the hospital and my friend sent it to me as an open call and I said, "Yeah, I'll submit the script I was working on 6 months ago." There you go. And yeah, wild, wild, wild.
well, see, that's what makes it so worthwhile is when you don't expect it,
Yes.
it happens, and then you're like, oh, wait a minute, I'm one of five,
Yeah.
so then you're like, oh, I did something really great, but then you've come out with this great film, and I've seen a few films this year that I always kind of call a breath of fresh air, and this one is a breath of fresh air because
Thank you.
we need these types of films because they can resonate to our heart, to our inner being, and just really lift us up when we really see that we don't have to allow economic status, we don't have to allow cultural status or stereotypes to hold anyone back. If you have a dream, chase it. So ladies and
Yeah.
gentlemen, Evelyn Lorena's Oscar qualified short film, Gabriela, is about a young, undocumented Guatemalan woman who pursues her dream of swimming for a prominent country club swim team. Now, despite her single minded determination, Gabriela is continually confronted with her overprotective mother's fears, limitations on her economic and legal status, and her own self judgment. Now, as she questions her self worth against the structures of contemporary American Southern life, Gabriela embarks on a quest towards personal freedom and self acceptance. Now, this film goes beyond the normal storyline. This is a film that should help each of us reach down, pull out those long lost and or dormant dreams that we were called to pursue. Now, when a dream is birthed from the inside, only the creator put it there, and it was made to be watered, as in this film, and fed so it can come to life. Dreams were made to be pursued, and this film, Gabriela, should be viewed as an inspiration and a motivation for you to step out in faith and get going. Now, as one of my best friends tells me, either move or die. And dreams aren't made to die, so get moving. And Evelyn, I want to thank you so much for sharing this amazing film with me today. You are an inspiration, and
Thank
much
you.
success to you on your Oscar journey.
Thank you. Thank you so much. That means so much. And you're a wonderful interviewer. And as I've told you early on, I'm so impressed with the way that you interview everyone. So thank you so much.
Well, you're very welcome. And I think we took a film and we took it deep since we're
We
talking
took a
about
deep.
water with this film, but we took it deep. And but again, ladies and gentlemen, this is a film, Gabriela, that everyone needs to see. You need to, as I say, absorb it, let it, in this sense, no pun intended, wash over you, and just know that whatever is lurking inside of you that you've always desired to do, get out there and start doing it, regardless how young you are or how old you are. So, with that, ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you for watching. And as for me, well, you'll either see me at the movies or from the red carpet.